can't see the people over there. I'm short. And they won't know what I'm saying. They won't. Thank you very much. This is much better for me, and I hope it's much better for you all. I'll start, because this part shouldn't be on the record, but I came down here, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, because I'd heard about the scuba diving. And I want to say that I found that this place is even more beautiful underwater than it is above the water, and it's beautiful above the water. But when your former minister was he had just come on as the Minister of Tourism and came to Atlanta, and I asked him about the scuba diving, and he'd never been scuba diving. So I said, I'm coming down, but you're going to have to go down with me. So I tell you, it's one of the most beautiful scenes in my life. It's unforgettable. I was down at about 50 feet of water, and there's the most beautiful coral garden you ever want to see. And then you get to the edge, and it drops down to about 300 feet. Well, I stopped at 50 feet, and he stayed up about 30 feet. But my son and my brother went down 110 feet. And the thing that's so miraculous is I could see them just as clearly at 110 feet as I could see my niece and the minister at 30 feet. That it is absolutely incredible. And if you haven't found a way to get down, get you a little submarine or something and go look. The other story I shouldn't tell, but I have to. He's introduced me as a pastor and all sorts of wonderful things. But I came here for my wedding anniversary about 7 years ago, my 10th anniversary, and we had a beautiful, about 25 or 30 of our closest friends came, and we had an Easter sunrise service on the beach, and it was just a wonderful way to celebrate 10 years of my second marriage. My first marriage lasted 40 years before my wife went on to glory, and I loved it so much I was trying it again for 10 years. So, but as the other people left, they had been here at beaches, and we were over somewhere, Palm or something.
Point
Grace Bay.
Point Grace. Point Grace.
Hmm?
Point Grace.
Point Grace. And they brought all this liquor over. And there was one little bottle with about that much vodka in it. And I said, what'd you bring this for? And they said, well, we didn't want to throw it away. I said, you should have thrown it away. And I got a glass of ice and poured it over the ice and went to sit out on the deck to read. Well, I had just finished swimming up and down the beach. I was a swimmer in college, so I still like to show off, and I swim half a mile a day when I come down here, and so, but I didn't drink any water. And I think I took 2 sips of that vodka. Reverend, pray for me. And went to sleep. In the meantime, the sun moved, and I'm dehydrated from swimming a half a mile, and I'm dehydrated from going to sleep in the sun. And my wife comes and said, Andy, Johnny Cochran just died. And the shock, I jumped up and passed out. And if you've seen Diary of a Mad Black Woman, where they dragged the man, she dragged me into a tub of ice cold water and pulled me in it and called my doctor here. And he came and rehydrated me and saved my life. I've had such wonderful experiences here. that anytime I'm invited to come here for almost any reason, I can't turn down the invitation. But what I want to talk with you about is not what you see. It's how you see it. And Bobby Kennedy said that some people see things as they are and ask why. Others see things as they should be and ask why not. And I come from the latter school. And I can remember being with Martin Luther King right after he won the Nobel Prize. And we came back from Oslo and went to see President Johnson. And he spent over an hour and a half telling us why the president couldn't introduce voting rights legislation in 1965. And he ended his soliloquy, because he didn't give us a chance to say anything, with the simple statement, you know, everybody thinks the president has a lot of power, but there's really not much power in this job. And I left kind of discouraged. But when we left the White House, walking down that dark road out of the West Wing, I said to Dr. King, what do you think? And remember, he was 33 years old then, and shorter than me. His answer was, you know, I think we got to figure out how to get this president some power. Now, normally, most people would have gotten discouraged. But we went back, this was about the 20th of December. We went back, and on the 2nd of January, we started in Selma. And by the end of March, the president was standing up before the Congress of the United States, offering voting rights legislation, which passed and which gave us the right to vote and transformed the entire political situation in the United States of America and maybe even the world. Because as a result of that Voting Rights Act, we elected Jimmy Carter, and I ended up being ambassador to the United Nations, and we got Nelson Mandela out of jail, and we changed the whole landscape of the planet. And there were no two less likely, less impressive human beings when you first got to know them than Martin Luther King and Jimmy Carter. They were very ordinary people in many, many ways. Not nearly in some ways as distinguished as many of you, but they had a way of believing and seeing things that nobody else could see. And that's what I want to try to get you to do. I can't teach you anything about government or about business, but I can, I hope, get you to see the world as I see it. And I've been privileged to not only spend a lot of time in the Caribbean, but in the course of my life, there are about 206 countries that are member nations in the United Nations. And I've had a chance to visit 152 of them. And there's no place that I've been where I have been discouraged and when I have not seen potential. But almost every place I've been, everybody is complaining about what exists. And they always see what's wrong. And the news media is most guilty of that. If it bleeds, it leads. And so if you look at your evening news and believe that that's the world in which we live, you have a jaundiced view of God's universe. But let me stop for a minute and say that let's talk about money. Well, let's talk about need. You know the needs of the world. And we could talk for weeks about the needs of Turks and Caicos, the needs of the Caribbean, the needs of the planet, and We all know everything that's wrong. We're experts in what's wrong. We're learning that there's a tremendous amount of technology available. But we always think that there's no money. And that's not true. There is more money on the planet Earth than has ever been in existence at any time in the Earth's history. Now let me just document that for you. The United States economy is $16 trillion. The Japanese economy is $5 trillion. The Chinese economy is $7 trillion. But European economy, including Russia, is 17 trillion. But the estimates in both Forbes magazine and The Economist, none of them very liberal magazines, very conservative magazines, estimate that there's between 21 and 40 trillion dollars. Trillion dollars that's in tax havens. Now, the reason Mr. Romney lost the presidency was basically they wondered where his money was, and it was down in the Cayman Islands, everybody said. Now, the problem is that the money isn't in the Cayman Islands. See, if it was in the Cayman Islanders would know what to do with it. But we have these tax havens in Switzerland and Holland and the Isle of Wight and Gabon in Africa, and people hide their money because they're afraid. I call it scared money. It's not American money, and it's not just European money. The Chinese are afraid to invest in China. So of the $7 trillion that the Chinese make, they hide of almost $2 trillion in offshore accounts. Nigeria has almost a $2 trillion economy, but 900 billion estimate is not being reinvested in Nigeria. It's being hidden. Angola takes its money to Brazil. Everybody's afraid to put their money anywhere. Now, when you think of the fact that there is more money in hiding, this scared money, than there is in action, then we've got not mainly a problem, we've got an opportunity. When you say that there is technology that is capable of doing almost anything, then if you can ever put these two together, there are very few problems we can't solve on this planet. I remember going to Rwanda right after the genocide, and I didn't want to go to Rwanda, but when I went to Rwanda and went to a not nearly as nice a resort as this, out by the pool, I saw people using their computers. And I said, where are you hooked up? They said, oh no, the first thing we did when we opened the Intercontinental in Rwanda was make sure that the whole property was Wi-Fi, so that anybody can come here and can sit by the beach or sit by the pool and do business. It was a very inexpensive technological move, but it probably turned around the economy of Rwanda. And it made it easy and accessible for people with money to come there and get to know people. I'm saying that there are few little things like that that can make an enormous difference in the world in which we live. But let's start where we know. I started in Atlanta at a time when we were in a deep recession. And Ronald Reagan had just been elected president, and he was cutting off all the money that was available for the cities. But I'd been on the banking committee in Congress, and I'd been at the UN, and I knew where some of this, it wasn't the trillions of dollars that it is now, but it was billions of dollars And we used to call it petrodollars. It was the money that was made on Middle Eastern oil that was in Swiss banks and Dutch banks and German banks and Japanese banks. They had less money, but hid more widely. I made it my business to visit people in those money centers. And we started with the Dutch. And in the first term of my term as mayor, the Dutch put almost $1.5 billion into one little city, Atlanta. We were 1 million people. We had just become 1 million people. And the Dutch built 2 Ritz-Carlton hotels. They built an office building that became the IBM building. They bought 2 enormous shopping centers. If you've been to Atlanta, they're Phipps Plaza and the Perimeter Mall. They put $1.5 billion in Atlanta right quick and turned the economy around. At the time, we were the murder capital of the world. We had the highest per capita murder rate of any city in the United States. We were 70% black. The business community had decided that we could not have another black mayor. And they said people don't invest in places where the mayors are black for too long. And we'd had one black mayor and they said that's enough. So I got challenged because I didn't, to give in to that meant to give in to racism. But the mayor was making $50,000 a year and I had 3 kids in college, so I sure wasn't anxious to be mayor. But there was a nice little lady about 80 years old who I used to think was old back then. And she came into the meeting on a cane and she stopped in front of me and she shook a stick in my face and she said, "Look here, boy, when you came here, you wasn't nothing. We made you somebody." I said, "Well, Martin Luther King made me somebody." She said, "We made him too." She said, "Now we done sent you all over the world and you done been to the Congress and you done been to the United Nations. And if you don't know what to do, if you can't help us now, we done wasted our time on you." And she turned and walked out of the room. I said, "Oh, Lord." I got to run for mayor. And I ran for mayor, and I said to the business community, I said, "Look, I know you don't want another black mayor, but I think I can win without you. But I can't govern without you. That there's not enough money in government to be successful. And so when I win, I'm coming back to you." I got one businessman who's a friend. I said, "Look, I need one white man on my side." I said, "Because if I win, they're going to all be mad. But if you will be with me, then you can help heal the gap." So he and the president of Coca-Cola, who was Latin American, Cuban, decided that they would quietly support me. I went to see a group of bankers and I talked to them like I'm talking to you about all the money that was available around the world. And when I got through, I said to Charlie Loudermilk of Aaron's, I said, "Charlie, how did I do?" He said, "You did fine." I said, "Well, what did they say?" He said, "You don't want to know." I said, "Why not?" I said, "No, please tell me. I need to know." He said, "Well, they said, Charlie, where did you get that nut from?" And that was the attitude of the banking community to what I was saying, which is very similar to what I'm saying to you. So if you think, where did I come from? Where did Fortis get this nut from? It's been said before, except that the money came in. And we found out that all we needed to do to attract money was have good ideas, good people, and make the money safe, honest, and efficient. And that's not hard to do. That we started by accident with the taxi drivers because a Japanese group came to Atlanta and they got in a cab, and the cab driver was angry because he'd been sitting there in the hot sun waiting for 4 hours for a ride. And he wanted a $16 fare to the airport. And they were just going 2 blocks away, which they easily could have walked, but they were from Japan and they didn't know where the other hotel meeting place was. And he fussed so much and was so grumpy and gripey that they said, okay, look, okay, just take us to the airport. And they went to the airport and went back to Japan. Wow. What that grouchy cab driver did, which turned out not to be bad, was kill a $150 million deal. So everybody is important in the scheme of development. So after I heard that, every cab driver had to take a course to get their relicense. And we started making, every cab driver became an Atlanta ambassador. And they had to know the history. They do that in London. It takes a long time to get a license to be a cab driver in London. You have to, it's probably more rigorous than most college courses. But you know everything when they get through. We basically had to do an attitude adjustment. But we not only did it with the cab drivers, we did it with the hotels. And you already do a good job of that. You have some of the nicest people in the world. People make you feel welcome. People don't have to come here. They can go anywhere. They come here because you make them feel important. And it was probably lucky that the Ritz-Carlton was the first hotel to come, because the Ritz-Carlton has a slogan for their staff that ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. And they treat the staff like ladies and gentlemen, and they empower them to be courteous and respectful to the guests, so that they create a family atmosphere that makes the Ritz-Carlton one of the premier brands in tourism. So we did that, but the hardest ones we had to deal with were the customs people. When you've been flying overnight, and if you changed planes in Miami, I know you're mad. Come through Atlanta next time. And you get here and you have to stand in line, and then somebody's sitting down there, boom. Look up, smile. And we had to say to them, look, you like your job? Everybody that flies in here first class is going to spend at least $1,000 a day. And everybody that flies in here coach is going to spend $200 a day. If you want them to keep coming, lift your eyes and welcome them to Atlanta. That does not take much. But it makes all the difference in the world when you've been on a 12-hour flight and the last part is bumpy and you're scared about this last plane crash and wondering whether you're going to land safely or not. You fill with anxiety when you land. And that's why your music there at the airport is very good. But it's not enough to have music if you don't have everybody else smiling and everybody else putting you in a groove to be here. So I'm saying that these are the kinds of things that don't cost money and that make a difference. Now, we developed a strategy that after we brought the Dutch in, we brought the Germans in, and but it all hinged around our airport. And our airport, I went, the first week I was in the mayor's office, they sent me to Wall Street to sign my name to $300 million worth of tax-exempt municipal bonds. And I said, well, who's going to pay for these? Well, the airlines. If you add up the landing fees, the gate charges, the concessions, the parking lot, and everybody has to pay the debt service before they make any money. And everybody has to go bankrupt before the city has to pay. I could sign for $300 million, $500 million. I mean, over the course of the last 5 mayors, we've probably gotten $10 billion in tax-exempt municipal bonds sold on Wall Street because we pay the bills on time. And we built it very conservatively, but everybody shared in the building. 35, 40%. Since we're a 70% black city, 35% of the people who did the work on the buildings were black to start with. This last international terminal, which cost us $1.5 billion that we just opened this year, 53% of the construction, the design, the engineering, the concessions, 53% went to people of color or females, because before we started, no women contractors had any business with the government. And so we not only liberated the poor, blacks, but white women and people of color generally were locked out of the economy. So we used the airport to bring them in. Now, it's such a phenomenal success story. You probably won't believe it, but let's just say we spent $10 billion on it over the last 20 years. In 2010, there were 234,000 jobs related to that airport. And the earnings impact on the city was $52.3 billion. That's bigger than the total economy of Turks and Caicos in the one airport. But it wasn't that way. When I first saw the airport in Atlanta in the 50s, it was a Quonset hut not as big as this room with one runway. Now it's got 6 runways. We're building 7. And we're getting planes coming. We're the largest and busiest airport in the world. But it works for the entire region. But there's little or no government money in it. There's little or no city taxpayer money in it. It's all privately financed. So the key to economic development is public-private partnerships. The public has to conceive of the project. The private sector has to come up with a management plan for funding and managing it and earning a profit on it. But once we decide to conceive it, we turn it loose to the private sector. And so that airport, while it's in the name of the city of Atlanta, for the most part, it's owned by Delta and Marriott and all of the people who make money there, including the guys who shine shoes. So everybody is a piece of the deal. Now, I'm saying that the other thing that made us distinct was that we were honest. I had a Japanese company that was trying to locate in Ohio. And they'd gone to Ohio in January, and this was June. And they had been getting the runaround. It took too long. They were still trying to get building permits. So the guy was heading back to Japan and had to come through Atlanta, and somebody told him, well, before you leave, call Andy Young at City Hall. And I gave everybody my number at City Hall. Everybody could call City Hall and talk to the mayor, because anybody with money. Because the poor people just came in with no appointments. You know, I mean, you know, but it didn't take much to stop what you were doing in a meeting, and I could go into a ceremonial office. I could hear their project. I could give them a phone number. I could put them in assign them to one person. And that one person would walk them through all of our processes. It used to take us 7 months to do a building permit. We actually got the people together and said, look, we're not going to make it in 7 months. We got it down to 7 minutes. Because we set as a goal, you have a 30-minute parking lot meter out in front of City Hall. We want people who want to do business to be able to come in, put a quarter in the meter, and come in and do all their business in a half an hour. That was our goal. And usually it took us a little longer than 7 minutes, and they might have to come back once, but we made the licensing and business process so efficient that people started telling other people. This Japanese gentleman, when they gave him my number, he was trying to get into his office by October. It was Suzuki. And I said, you know, we had industrial parks that we'd already laid out with electricity and streets and plumbing, and all they had to do was hire a spec building, and we could put up one of those concrete buildings in, 3 months. And so we told him, even though it was June, we could get him in by October. The weekend before he was supposed to get in, they wouldn't turn on the lights. So he woke me up. He had my phone number at home. He woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, "You're just like everybody else." I said, "Wait a minute, what does it matter?" He said, "They tell me they can't turn on the lights. Who do I have to pay to get the lights turned on?" I said, "You don't have to pay anybody." I said, wait a minute, I don't know what's the matter. It's 3 o'clock in the morning here. So I woke up the guy who was in charge of building permits, and he said, "Look, it's a matter of law. We can't turn on electricity in a building till we have the insurance straight." So I called him right back before he left that day, and I said, "All we need is your insurance policy, and your lights will be on at 8 o'clock in the morning." He gave me the insurance policy, the lights were on. He talked all over Japan about that. We ended up with 300 Japanese companies coming into Atlanta because we were efficient, we were honest, and what's the other one? Safe. The Japanese, when the Dutch sold their business to the Japanese. When the Japanese started losing money, they found somebody else to sell it to. But the buildings don't move. You know, and the jobs don't change. Somebody else with money comes along. Now, what I'm saying about Turks and Caicos and the entire Caribbean, and I don't look at the Caribbean as a series of islands. I learned that when I first went to the UN in Odebear in Costa Rica. We were working on the Panama Canal. He pulled down a map and he said, "You people see us wrong." And I said, "What?" He said, "What you see is a sea with a lot of little islands." He said, do you realize how much it costs the United States to connect New York with San Francisco? It was trillions of dollars to build your highway system. We don't need to build a railroad system or a highway system. The Caribbean is its own transport network. And all we have to do is start thinking of ourselves as a continent of 200 million people, and we can compete with the United States, we can compete with Brazil, we can compete with Africa, Nigeria and West Africa, because when you add up all of the people starting with Mexico and coming on around Venezuela and Colombia and Guyana and Suriname and then come up the island chain, it's a market of 200 million people, which is not thought of as a market. And the first person who starts thinking of this as a market and marketing it as they would market a continent like the United States, if they marketed to the Caribbean continent, now Fortis is almost there, because you go from here all the way over to Belize, so you got one end or the other. All you got to do is hook up everything in between. But I'm saying that looking at the world differently and realizing that there's more than enough money, if we can stop these people from being scared, if we can assure them that their money's safe. And I always got in trouble with your people because I was not much for independence. Because independence doesn't give you anything. I mean, I'm saying we're not independent in Atlanta, but we don't get anything from Washington. So we forgot Washington and went to Wall Street and went to Zurich. We left the government and went to the private economy. Now, no government in this world has any money right now. They are all broke. All of them. You're not going to get anything from any government anywhere. And don't forget that. But here's this $140 trillion in this global economy that is controlled electronically. If we knew the right numbers, we could dial up enough money right now to transfer all the money in here that we want. It's simply a matter of knowing the numbers. And you got people here who know the numbers. But the numbers and the attitudes and the ideas. And Jesse Jackson used to say something that I like, and I'll quit on that. He used to say, if we can conceive it and believe it, we can achieve it. And so I wish I had the problems you had. I would love to be 25 years old and starting out here, but as it is, I'll take 20 more years to my 81 years, and I'll still be working with you, I hope, 20 years from now.